They say you can't buy happiness, and I think that's true. But I also think the right investment can pay a big emotional dividend. Welcome back to the 50/50 Project, where every week I talk through an item on a list made up of one thing I've learned for each year I've lived. This week, we're back in the stuff category for a second stop. Last time we were here, I issued a stern, self-satisfied warning about not accumulating too many things. And of course, this time I'm back to encourage you to buy stuff. It all seems very confusing, I know, but hang in there with me. For thing number 11, Wring big returns from little investments. So really, this whole episode is rooted in my deep and abiding love for lip balm. About 15 years ago, I was standing in the checkout of a Lafayette, Indiana Payless store, which is what they call the Kroger stores in that city for whatever reason, and I realized I was running low on lip balm. And on that fateful day, I randomly grabbed a single tube of cake batter flavored chapstick from the checkout display, not knowing that it would change my life. You know, I loved everything about that lip balm. The smell, the taste, insofar as a chapstick really has a taste, the texture of it, which was softer and less waxy than your standard blue tube chapstick. It was the perfect lip balm for me. And for the next several years, I was able to ferret out refills of it at local stores, either in singles at the checkout or sometimes even in packages of 3 in health and beauty sections. And for that time in my life, for that golden time, I was happy and my lips were moisturized. And then it just disappeared from stores near me, and I was pretty devastated. I searched and searched the shelves for it to no avail, and then I began that long slog toward the next best thing. And if you've ever had a favorite product just disappear, you know exactly what I'm talking about, where I auditioned like 50 tubes of other types of chapstick, and then various balms made by Nivea, and then assorted tubes of Carmex, and then onto those fancy round balms that were really popular for a while. And everything was more or less fine, but not quite as good, not quite what I wanted. And then one day I was back in the checkout line and I happened to spy a special seasonal hot cocoa flavored chapstick, so I snagged it. And when I opened it up, the company URL caught my eye. So I went to the chapstick website, and what do you know? They sell all their varieties directly online. And right there was a box of 12 cake batter chapsticks for $24. And I ordered it. And now every 6 months or so, I go back to that website and I order another box. Now, this probably should not stand out as a watershed moment for me, but it kind of is. When I got that box of 24 chapsticks in exactly the variety I wanted, I felt rich and powerful and special, and it made my life a tiny bit better and my heart a little bit happier. It doesn't cost significantly more money to special order the lip balm I really want. It just takes a little planning, a little time to order and wait for shipping, and maybe an extra $3 over buying an equivalent number of chapsticks in the store. It's just a matter of making a really minimal investment of time and money twice a year to have the exact right thing for this task that I perform 4 or 5 or even 6 times a day during the winter, every single day. So that's a big payoff for a little investment. 4 or 5 times a day, this balm works perfectly. Instead of 4 or 5 times a day using something else that's just a little bit annoying or disappointing or underwhelming. So to me, that's a huge ROI for a teeny tiny outlay of time and money. And something very similar occurred with regard to a variety of black tea that I really, really like. I initially found it in my Alpharetta, Georgia Publix, and I found it without trouble for many years, and then again, it just disappeared from the shelves. Why does that keep happening? Why? This happened right before I moved back to Indiana. So once I got here, I did some searching around on the internet and discovered it in stock in a Target store not too far from some of the other places I had been shopping in. So now, once a month or so, I make a tiny little side trip over to this particular Target and grab a few boxes of Tezo's Vanilla Bean Macaroon Black Tea. And then every day for the next month, I have exactly the cup of tea I want to have for my afternoon break for the cost of just a slight detour on my errand run. And I realize that this, like so much of what I have to say on this entire podcast, probably sounds pretty self-evident. If you like something and it adds to the quality of your daily life and it's not expensive, then just go get it, right? But it took me a while to figure out that I should check online for that particular lip balm. And I sometimes wonder if I hadn't been in the process of a move to an unfamiliar city full of unfamiliar stores, would I have searched for the Tazo tea, or would I have just sort of listlessly checked on the shelves at a few places I already went to and then given up if I didn't stumble across it and settle for something else that's not quite right or not quite what I wanted? I think for some of us, or for me anyway, it can feel a little precious, maybe a little silly, a little self-indulgent to dig in and really take those few extra steps to get exactly what I want. Maybe I feel a little stupid that cake batter chapstick, as opposed to, green apple chapstick, should have any kind of impact on my happiness or well-being. Maybe that exposes me as an especially weak or fragile creature, but the reality is, life is hard. Joy can be kind of elusive. Green apples, a little nasty, and if you can catch an extra handful of happiness for a minimal investment, maybe we should. So now, if I find myself in a place where I can get a happiness bounce, or a comfort bounce, or a contentment bounce, or whatever you want to call it, out of a reasonable investment of time or money or effort, I try to do it more now. I think it's good for me to really seize the opportunities to put more of what I love into my life when possible and when reasonable. I do have to be careful, though, that this doesn't become a financially disastrous blank check situation where I'm hemorrhaging time or money or effort chasing material versions of happiness. Because, as I think I've said before here, I do like stuff and I do like buying it. And if I'm not careful, my bank account is suddenly too empty and my apartment is suddenly too full. So I try really hard to use a kind of ROI analysis to focus on acquiring stuff that I really do love and things which really do make me substantially happier. I really like the work of Ramit Sethi, who is a guy who wrote a pretty wildly successful book about money management called I Will Teach You to Be Rich. And one of the things I like about this guy is that he seems pretty realistic in that he's not telling you to live on a diet of tap water and sawdust until you are debt-free and sitting on a $50K savings account or whatever. He seems to be a little more of a realist, in my opinion, and a little less of an ascetic. He's not against people expending resources on things that bring joy, but he does point out that very few of us have the financial means to indulge in what we want in every area of life. Not many of us can splurge on a giant home and a fancy luxury car and all the latest technology and this season's designer clothing and, 2 vacations a year with 5-star accommodations. And to be really real about it, some of us struggle to indulge at all in any of these categories. And almost all of us would go under if we let ourselves go wild in every corner of our lives. So we have to know what really matters to us. Maybe for you, it is having a big home where you can entertain your entire family in a setting that is beautiful and feels comfortable for guests. You might have to drive a used minivan instead of a brand new Lexus to make that happen. Or, scaling it back a little, you might love to do arts and crafts, and so to fund that hobby and the supplies you need there, you might decide to carry the same iPhone for 5 years instead of just 3. Most of us make these negotiations pretty organically, almost subconsciously maybe. We have a sense of what matters to us, of what actually makes us feel happier, healthier, more at peace, or maybe more ourselves. And what that is seems to vary pretty wildly from person to person. And I don't think one set of priorities is better or worse than any other, just different from person to person. And in my experience, it's even different from season to season within my own life. Sometimes, though, I do struggle to separate what's important to my happiness from what's less so. Sometimes I get swept up in a trend, or at least when I was younger, I would get caught up in a wave of peer pressure to have certain things. And when that happens, I can find myself making poor investments and dumping too many resources into stuff that doesn't pay dividends for me in any real way, emotionally or spiritually. I've been thinking about this a lot for a while, and I think one of the little tests that I can apply to determine whether I really love something or whether it truly adds to my quality of life in a substantial way is the care test. I don't imagine this works with everything, but I have found that something is usually a great investment if I find myself taking pleasure in taking care of it. The best example of this is my obsession with fresh flowers. I love flowers. Everyone who really knows me knows I love flowers, and they might also know that I carry just a little bit of guilt for that. Flowers are kind of expensive. They're kind of extravagant because they're temporary. They don't really do anything. They just sort of sit there in a vase until they wilt and die. It's logical to argue that there's a better ROI in maybe a plant that at least lives longer. So sometimes I do feel a bit bad about the amount of money I spend on flowers. But when I moved into this apartment, my best friend had a floral arrangement sent a day ahead of me so that when I got here, they would already be here. I'd have flowers in this house. And they added such a bright spot to an unfamiliar place that I decided I was just going to go full tilt into a flower habit. And that beautiful glass vase that came with that arrangement, I just decided it would stay right there on my new kitchen counter, and it would always be filled with something gorgeous. Because I realized the emotional ROI was high enough for me to justify those costs. And here's where the care test comes in, I think. I don't just stick flowers in a vase and leave them there for a week and then toss them out and replace them. I pretty much take them out of the vase every day, or at least every other day. And I change their water, and I add a little flower food to the water and stir it in. And I trim a little off the stems every time to make sure they're getting good water flow. And I rearrange them when I put them back in. So I touch them, and I smell them, and I fuss with them, and I tend to them. For 5 or 10 minutes every morning, I'm engaged with caring for these flowers, and I really enjoy that time. For a lot of people, that would just be a giant pain in the ass that they're not interested in and that they don't really get anything out of. But that's sort of a soul-filling activity for me, a moment to literally brush up against beauty in a really tactile, direct way. So caring for those flowers isn't a chore for me, it's a joy. And that's one way I know that this thing is a worthwhile acquisition for me. I've also got a little bit of a handbag collection. I really like handbags as sort of a fashion design artifact, and I think they're like a really cool intersection of form and function and beauty and performance. And to be clear, I don't have a closet full of Chanel bags. These are moderately priced bags, and some of them even come from Target. If I like it, I like it, and I don't really care about the label. But whether I pull one of the bags out for the day that's one of my pricier ones or one that maybe I got for $20 on clearance somewhere very modest, I always tend to follow a procedure when I get home. I take everything out of the bag. I often wipe it down with a leather wipe and buff it dry with a clean cloth. I put it back in its own storage bag. I return it to its shelf. I don't think I've ever come home and just tossed one of my bags on the floor. I always take care of it, and usually I do it right away. And I like that process. I like handling these pretty bags and caring for them and putting them to rights. I enjoy that act of stewardship. And I don't feel that way about everything I own. And for me, it's a way of knowing that I really enjoy something, that I'm really getting an emotional ROI from that bag. And as I age up, I feel that I know myself a bit better in this way, and I do find myself investing less in things that don't pass that kind of care test. A friend of mine is a fantastic home cook, and his kitchen is his happy place. And he loves caring for his very expensive pots and pans. He likes cleaning them in exactly the right way and oiling them and doing all the fussy little things that he's supposed to do for them. For me, a $30 skillet is going to work just as well as a $400 saucepan. And both of them, with me, are going to end up crammed in my dishwasher, whether they have hand wash instructions or not. So what's a great ROI for him would be a total waste of time and money for me. It's all about knowing what pays dividends for you and then focusing your time and your money and your energy there. So yeah, that's taken a little bit of a turn, I think, from my original point, but I'm going to make one more even wider pivot before I close. The last thing that I will say on ROIs is this. I wish I had understood a lot more about ROI in a literal financial sense much sooner in my life. I don't know why public education in my day covered frog dissection and occasionally square dance, as the meme goes, but not basic information about investment and compounding interest. I am certainly not here to tell anybody else what to do with their money, and I could scarcely be less qualified to do anything. But I personally wish I had started pouring resources into my 401k and into other retirement structures far, far sooner in my life. I also bitterly regret letting my nest egg sit in a standard savings account for years and years where it drew almost no interest instead of investigating high-yield savings accounts, thereby leaving literally thousands of dollars in interest on the table over the years and getting a really shitty ROI on my money. So again, I have no specific advice, but if you haven't thought about ROI in concrete financial terms, that might be one more item to put on your to-do list. And to do it in your own time and in your own way and with your own sources, but maybe do it. And I say that especially to young women, and well, really just young people actually, because time is very important in investing, and it's still on your side. Super quick execution score, 5 out of 10. Getting half credit here. I'm mindful of the importance of keeping an eye on all these different kinds of ROI in my life. But that doesn't mean I always act on the information I glean, and I could get better about targeting all kinds of investment in all areas of my life, and to make sure that I'm not putting in more than I'm getting out, and that I'm not missing opportunities to make small investments that really pay out big emotional or spiritual dividends. Okay, that was kind of a wide-ranging tour of, scantily related ideas today. I hope that you are able to keep making the kinds of investments that bring you huge returns of happiness and health and lip balm. Thanks for spending some time with me today. I'll be back next week with thing number 12.